Ireland's population halved in 15 years, not because of war, but because of a potato. Here's what every textbook tells you. The Irish potato famine was a natural disaster. A fungus called Phytophthora infestans arrived from America in 1845, destroyed the crop that fed 8 million people, and Ireland starved. Tragic, unavoidable, an act of God. The story ends with mass death and emigration. And here's the trick, that narrative is doing something very specific. It's hiding the actual mechanism of how a biological failure turned into an economic catastrophe. Because potatoes didn't just disappear. The system that made Ireland dependent on potatoes in the first place, that's where the real money story lies. By 1840, Ireland wasn't a unified economy. It was a colonial extraction machine. English landlords owned roughly 90% of the land. Irish tenant farmers worked it. The rent had to be paid in cash, pounds sterling, not potatoes. So how did tenants get cash? They sold their grain, their livestock, their dairy. What did they eat? Potatoes, cheap, calorie-dense, reliable. A family of 6 could survive on 1 acre of potatoes. For landlords, this was perfect. Tenants paid rent. Tenants fed themselves on scraps. The system balanced. Then in autumn 1845, the blight hit. Phytophthora infestans, a water mold that turned potato plants to black slime in days. Within weeks, roughly 40% of the Irish potato crop failed. Tenants panicked. They'd eaten their seed potatoes. They had no crop for next year. But here's what they still had to do, pay rent. The landlord didn't care about the blight. The contract said cash on the first of the month. So tenants did what they'd always done. They sold what they had. Grain, cattle, furniture, tools, everything went to market to cover rent. And here's where the economy reveals itself. While people were starving in the countryside, grain was still being exported from Ireland to England. Shipload after shipload. The same year the blight struck, Ireland exported enough grain, beef, and butter to feed the entire population twice over. But it wasn't for Irish people. It was payment. The extraction continued. By 1847, the blight had returned and destroyed roughly 90% of the crop. Now there was nothing left to sell. Tenants couldn't pay rent. Landlords responded with evictions. Between 1845 and 1855, roughly 1 million people were forcibly removed from their homes. Families were thrown onto the road with their possessions. Many died of disease and exposure in the weeks that followed. The system didn't break, it hardened. Here's the pivot. The accepted story says people starved and emigrated. True, but look at the cash flow. Ireland's landlord class didn't lose money during the famine. They raised rents on the surviving tenants. They consolidated smaller plots into larger estates for sheep grazing, more profitable, required fewer tenants. Between 1845 and 1855, Irish landowners' wealth actually concentrated. The famine was profitable for the people who controlled the system. The people with no land, no crops, and no cash had one option: leave. Ships called coffin ships carried Irish immigrants across the Atlantic. Around 2 million people left Ireland between 1845 and 1855. Most landed in Boston, New York, Philadelphia. They were desperate, unskilled, and willing to work for almost nothing. American employers paid them a fraction of what local workers earned. Irish labor flooded the market. Wages for working-class jobs across the Northeast dropped measurably. But here's the trick within the trick. American employers didn't just gain cheap labor. They gained leverage over every other worker. Wages for unskilled jobs stayed depressed for decades. The working class was divided. Native-born workers resented Irish immigrants. Irish immigrants competed against each other for survival. This fractured labor solidarity at the exact moment industrial capitalism was consolidating. American factories got richer. Irish immigrants lived in poverty. Both outcomes trace back to a single cause, a colonial extraction system that prioritized rent over people. Ireland's population never recovered. In 1841, it was around 8.5 million. Today, it's roughly 5 million. The blight itself lasted a few years. The economic restructuring it triggered lasted generations. Landlords consolidated estates. Rural Ireland depopulated. Remaining tenants worked under worse conditions for higher rents. The system that survived the famine was more efficient at extracting wealth and less capable of sustaining a large population. The fungus was just the trigger. The real story of the Great Blight isn't about nature overwhelming society. It's about how a system designed to extract wealth from one group for the benefit of another used a natural disaster to become even more efficient at extraction. The fungus killed the crop. The economic structure killed the people, and the structure survived intact, transformed, profitable. That's not a tragedy, that's a mechanism. And understanding it tells you something about how economies actually work when the pressure hits. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe. There's a new unsolved economic mechanism every week that rewrites what you thought you knew. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.